fence.
Check, check,
And
check.
chain link fence. And they
We
cut
are,
the fence between 35
we are
and
at,
back to 54.
actually slightly past 6 o'clock.
Meeting canceled, or?
Well, that's your prerogative.
Well, prerogative, well. All right, well then, I will call the Riverside City Council meeting for Thursday, December 5th, 2024, to order at 6:01 PM. One said very ominously. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Denning?
Here.
Ms. Fry? Here. Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Present.
Mayor Williams?
Here. No absent council members. Mr. Manager, any additions or corrections to the agenda as presented?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from the Deputy Mayor to accept the agenda, to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. If you are able, please join me to rise and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Also, at this time, the Deputy Mayor would like to ask us for a moment of silence, and I'll turn it over to him.
Today, the Mad River Riverside community lost a pretty valuable member of the youth community, sports community, Stebbins community. Tragically today, Derek Gunter passed away. If anybody knows Derek, he was a role model to several athletes, children over decades, and I've had the privilege of coaching with him my son's first year. Went to school with him. So many kids and now adults have looked up to him for many years, and I know that now he's coaching JV basketball. Well, was coaching JV basketball at Stebbins High School this year. So I know it's a big impact at Stebbins High School. I just want to take a moment of silence to honor his memory and think about his family. So thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. We've all had a chance to look at our meeting minutes from our November 14th and our work session and our November 21st council meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as published?
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from the Deputy Mayor to approve the minutes as published. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. As we do at every meeting, if there's any citizens who are joining us this evening who wish to comment on agenda or non-agenda items, we always accept citizens' petitions. There doesn't appear to be anyone joining us yet this evening, but the night's still young, although it's really dark out already. We'll move on our agenda to a liquor control, looks like a permit transfer, but I'll let the city manager explain.
I believe this is actually a new permit request for the Family Dollar on Burkhart. No objections found by the police department, so no action required by you all unless you'd like to object.
All right, looks like we're going to move on the agenda. As I just mentioned, we are always accepting citizens' petitions. I'll ask the clerk if there's been any agenda or any requests to speak turned in for agenda items this evening.
There have not been any requests to speak so far.
Yet. Thank you for clarifying. So that allows us to move into unfinished business, of which we do have an ordinance that we already had our first reading on, and tonight will be its second reading, public hearing and potential adoption, and that is ordinance 24-0-858, and I'd ask the city manager if we could get a very brief recall of this.
This just updates our notification requirements in the administrative code pursuant to the recent charter changes that were approved by voters.
All right.
to approve. Second.
All right, Riverside City Charter allows for an ordinance to be read by title only unless a council member requests otherwise. Madam Clerk, would you please read this ordinance by title only?
Ordinance 24-0858, an ordinance to repeal and replace Chapter 103 of the codified ordinances of the City of Riverside, Ohio.
I will now open the public hearing for ordinance 24-0-858 at 6:06 PM. If anyone wishes to speak on this ordinance, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing no one come forward and hearing no one, I will close the public hearing at 6:06 PM. Is there any further comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. We'll now move into new business, of which there are 5 ordinances and 3 resolutions. We are beginning our first readings and discussions on our annual budget. Is that correct, Mr. Manager?
Beginning of the readings, I'd
I'm
argue
sorry,
we've
beginning of the
discussed for quite a while.
Well, let's start talking about this, guys. It's December. We should really buckle down. There's only a few days left. So I'll begin with ordinance 24-0-859. City charter allows for the reading of an ordinance to be done by title only unless a council member requests otherwise. Do we have a motion and a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from the deputy mayor. Madam Clerk, would you please read this ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 240859, an ordinance to make permanent appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Riverside, State of Ohio for the period January 1 through December 31st, 2025.
Is there any further discussion from members of council? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. And our second ordinance is for supplementals. So is there a motion and a second for ordinance 24-0-860?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second for the deputy mayor. The city charter allows for the reading of an ordinance to be done by title only unless a council member requests otherwise. Madam Clerk, could you please read this ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 240860, an ordinance to make supplemental appropriations for current expenditures and other expenses, and other expenditures of the City of Riverside, State of Ohio for the period January 1 through December 31, 2024.
Is there any further discussion among members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. And just so we're aware, Mr. Manager, the next couple ordinances have to do with the building.
Yes, just
Buildings.
briefly, 861 is the note issuance for the proposed ADA compliant restroom increase, or excuse me, upgrades to both Wright Point facilities. 862 is the reissuance of the prior year's notes for Wright Point, and that includes a small paydown. 863 combines that so that when we go out to the market, we can just do it all at once. And these ordinances were drafted and approved and reviewed by our law director, but they were, drafted by our bond counsel, which is Dinsmore, reviewed and approved by our law director, and this is the recommended legislative approach. So they do say we have to do 3 of these.
Understood. Do we have a motion and a second for ordinance 24-0-861?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion for Mr. Joseph and a second for Mr. Brown. The city charter allows for the reading of an ordinance to be done by title only unless a council member requests otherwise. Madam Clerk, could you please read this ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 240861, an ordinance providing for the issuance of not to exceed $2 million building improvement special obligations bond anticipation notes, Series 2025, by the City of Riverside, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds, providing for the pledge of revenues for the payment of such notes, and declaring an emergency.
Is there any further discussion among members of council?
Yeah, I would just like to make note that no matter if we own these buildings or sell these buildings or whatever, these are things that need to be done either way. So it's not something that's just, we're just doing it because we want to do it, or it's necessarily we have to do it in order to kind of get these buildings ready for the next step of our goal of either getting rid of these buildings or renting them out completely, right? I mean, that's essentially, we've had these
Correct.
conversations in our work session and everything else. Just want to make sure that people know we're not just doing this because we want to do this.
Yes, all of the capital items that we have contemplated for Wright Point are exactly the kinds of things that any potential buyer would immediately discount a price because they would basically tell us that they would have to make these investments. So
Because-
it does help us position the buildings to be sold.
Because our goal next year is that won't be having this conversation.
From your lips to God's ears, my friend. Yes, that is the goal, and we will do our best to try to make that happen.
Okay.
All right, if there's no further questions or comments from members of council, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. And the next ordinance, ordinance 24-0-862. Do we have a motion and a second?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from the deputy mayor. The city charter allows for an ordinance to be read by title only unless a council member requests otherwise. Madam Clerk, would you please read this ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 240862, an ordinance providing for the issuance of not to exceed $4,390,000 building acquisition and improvement special obligation bond anticipation notes, 2025 renewal by the City of Riverside, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds, providing for the pledge of revenues for the payment of such notes, and declaring an emergency.
Is there any further discussion among members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. And our final ordinance for the evening, ordinance 24-0-863, which combines the previous two notes. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from Mr. Joseph. The city charter allows for an ordinance to be read by title only unless a council member requests otherwise. Madam Clerk, would you please read this ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 240863, an ordinance providing for the issuance of not to exceed $6,390,000 building improvements special obligation bond anticipation notes, Series 2025, by the City of Riverside, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds, providing for the pledge of revenues for the payment of such notes, and declaring an emergency.
Is there any further discussion among members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. We'll now move into our resolutions, of which we have three this evening. And our first one, Resolution 24-R-2993. Mr. Manager, could you please surmise this?
This is for some sanitary sewer line improvements, and I'll actually ask Ms. Moore to maybe jump in here with a little bit of extra context.
Good evening. This project, sanitary sewer connection for our service garage building on Harshman. Some folks might not know that the front building, police and fire building, is served by sanitary sewer, but our building is served by septic. It was installed in 1966. So we are in the source water protection area, and we've been working with our City of Dayton source water protection contact, and we will be receiving a grant that will cover 89% of the cost of this project. So tonight, we will be awarding the bid to Outdoor Enterprises, who was a successful bidder on this project. And then in 2 weeks, I will bring to you the resolution to accept the grant from the Source Water Protection Fund Board.
All right. Any other questions for the city manager or public services director?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from Mr. Joseph. All those in favor of Resolution 24-R-2993 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And our second resolution, Mr. Manager, the ESID.
This is adoption of amended rules for the ESID that would allow jurisdictions that are not contiguous to join the ESID.
The existing ESID.
The existing ESID, correct.
All right.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from the deputy mayor. All those, if there's no further questions, all those in favor of Resolution 24-R-2994 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And our final resolution of the evening, Mr. Manager.
Final resolution approves revisions to the bylaws for first suburbs as provided to council.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from Ms. Lomach. All those in favor of Resolution 24-R-2995 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Resolution carries. We will move into public comment for non-agenda items. I will ask the clerk at this time, how many slips have been turned in for public comment on non-agenda items?
There have been no slips turned in this evening.
All right. I thought if I asked the question differently, I'd get a different answer, but here we are, ready for the very impactful but always brief city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Not always in that order.
I'm happy, I'm happy to say that thanks to the many efforts of our hardworking staff, so Ms. Llewellyn, and I know Taryn Smithens, and I believe Ashley and Emily, our intern, helped to create and stuff the first round of no soliciting stickers, which I personally hand-delivered to the United States Post Office yesterday evening. Those will be going out. There will be another round. We have to do about 1,000 of these to cover everybody on the list. The first 500 just went out. If you don't get that in the next couple of days, you will hopefully get it before Christmas. But again, the Postal Service is busy this time of year. So if you can't wait, come on into City Hall because we have them here. So that's the first thing. The second, in addition to the other resolution that we'll bring to you next week, I will have some boilerplate resolutions to renew our agreements with Colliers for leasing services for these buildings as well as for property management services. I'm not anticipating major changes to those. The only real substantive change is that for the leasing side, we have basically been operating on a handshake agreement because our ultimate goal is to sell these properties. There will be an additional provision in there that contemplates brokerage services for a sale as well as for lease. So it's just covering that base for us. And I'm happy to take any questions. That'll be in your packet, and I'm available for that. We will, let's see, we will do a holiday luncheon for city staff on the 19th. I'll close the lobby for about an hour that day just to let folks participate in that. That's for the City Hall group. And finally, I did want to just bring to council's attention, Katie and Jim and I had some discussions after the last meeting where there was some talk about potentially changing the dates and possibly then the structure of council meetings. I will provide all this to you separately as well, but we have mocked up what amounts to a draft agenda about what that could look like. So if council has interest in changing meeting dates, potentially to move to a Monday meeting, this is, again, an example, it's very clearly labeled draft there, but about how we could accomplish that and maybe try to set up a meeting structure that's a little bit more efficient in the sense that we could do discussion items first at every business meeting, followed by the actual legislative items or the votes. Obviously, my intention would not be to have you talk about something and then immediately vote on it. But this would be a way of moving more to a 2-meeting-a-month rhythm, but providing a time at each meeting to have some discussion. So what that would look like is we would do the usual opening items. We would get to this item 7, which would effectively be, I would treat that kind of how we've been treating work sessions. So any sort of item that requires some time to chat through, we would plug into that portion of the agenda. And then we would move on to the regular business of ordinances and resolutions. And then, of course, all the usual public comments are still intact, as well as council member comments and city manager's report toward the end of the meeting. So again, just as a starting point for a conversation, this is a meeting format that avoids the need to open and close or try to set times for work sessions, because those sometimes can go long, sometimes they go short. We would just handle it all in 2 regular business meetings per month. And then if for some reason a Monday isn't workable, we would either, we in all likelihood would schedule for the following Tuesday. So if there's a Monday holiday, we could, ultimately it's up to you all, but that would be my suggestion, is to push the Monday meetings to Tuesdays instead. I believe Clayton actually has a very similar agenda pattern as what we're showing here as well. So just, again, food for thought. I'm happy to email this to everybody as well, but it's something to think about, because on the 19th, when we have our next business meeting, we will probably look to you to firmly set what you want your first meeting date to be for January. And if we move more toward this kind of a rhythm, January 6th would be that first meeting date. Any questions on?
The only question is food for thought for the council is that some of our, the planning commission and I think the BZA have their meetings on Monday nights, or I know planning commission does. And how is that going to impact them with us moving to Monday night?
I can speak to that.
Okay. Because I know they have issues trying to get people.
They do. what I've found with the current roster of Planning Commission is that Wednesday is a date that works best for them and
Okay.
avoids any other conflicts.
All right, I just wanted to
Yeah.
bring that
But
to everybody's
I have not
attention.
brought that to them until this body decides.
A question about the order of the proposed agenda. Is there a deliberate reason to have the discussion items prior to the business items? The reason I ask is because if we have people waiting to speak on the business items, there's always that tension of, wanting to not belabor our discussions, so that they can, not necessarily spend their whole evening here.
Well, and I'd like to add on to that. To be sure that we don't get pushed to vote on something that we have discussion on would be to have the discussion
That's true.
at the end of the agenda
That's true.
instead of the beginning, so that we don't move things too fast, because.
There'll
we
never be a
need-
chance for
you
that
know,
to
we want-
happen.
Yeah, there's a chance
Right.
that could happen, where
Yeah.
if the discussion is at the end, we don't have that, we don't have to worry about that. And I think that might be a better solution, and it would be a solution for Brenda's problem, too.
Yeah, that is purely your prerogative.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, I would certainly agree with Brenda that, and Mike's point also, that if there's people kind of sitting here staring, waiting, and we don't want to continue a discussion because we feel impolite, but we don't have the discussion we were supposed to have. And I also agree with Mike's point that we extinguish any worry that there could be something rushed through if we only vote prior to discussion. Then discussion points in my mind are going to be, here's what's coming up here's what's down the road a bit, maybe next
2
meeting.
weeks.
Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 months. But then the beginning of the next meeting, it's like taking a quiz at the beginning of class. Then you move on to the new stuff. So as Josh was saying, does the mayor set the agenda? Or does the handbook set the agenda? I mean, that type of tweak wouldn't be outside of the spirit of the current mock agenda in our council handbook.
Yeah, we would basically, all we would do is, I would probably just honestly replace the city manager's report with discussion items, because at that point, I can just give you updates on anything that's pertinent as well as what's coming up. And that would be something that we would talk about in agenda setting, and we would prepare that draft agenda, and then you would just set the date, and we'll have it ready for you, so.
Okay.
But I would be supportive of what you mentioned, Brenda. So thank you for mentioning that.
Makes a good point.
That's all I have.
All right. Well, then we'll move on to council member comments, and I will start with Ms. Lomach.
Okay, I have a couple of dates for you. Those of you who have not RSVP'd the chamber event next Thursday, the 12th, at Walnut Grove, please do so, maybe by tomorrow. I think the deadline was yesterday, but she's making the appropriate arrangements. And a date to put on your calendar is the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission Annual Dinner. You'll be happy to know it's going to be Thursday, the 24th of April, so you won't have to adjust the council meeting.
I thought for sure you were going to say Monday.
That's true, we won't be meeting on Thursday, so.
Do you know where that's at?
Anyway, so that's a date to put on your calendar
Do they have a location for that yet?
at the Marriott.
All right, same as last year.
And you'll be getting stuff to make your reservations and whatever. And I'd also like to ask that the council consider a resolution for Debbie Lieberman. Her last meeting is going to be on April the 17th, and there'll be a reception, in April, Jesus, December 17th will be her last meeting, and then that 18th, I believe, Wednesday night, will be a reception in the, I don't know what they call the basement of the arcade. It's got a name. Maybe you know that, Mayor.
The rotunda?
Huh?
It's
The tank?
The tank, it's called the
That's-
tank, yeah. The main floor is the rotunda.
And that's going to
The
be
tank's underneath.
a reception for her that evening on, and I don't have the time or anything, but I would like the council to consider a resolution. It doesn't have to be somebody there on the 17th. It would be nice if someone was there to present it.
Do you mean a proclamation?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
I'm sorry it's late.
No, that's not it, but a resolution is a
I
piece.
said a proclamation,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm having a tough day today, so.
yeah, I think we can certainly, I'll work with the clerk, and we can get something put together for Commissioner Lieberman.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Brown,
No comments today. Thank you.
Mr. Joseph.
Nothing.
All right. I will pass it on to Mr. Maxfield.
I don't have anything.
Ms. Fry?
Nothing tonight?
The blood drive was successful,
Oh.
and thank you to you.
Yes, we had actually, I thank you for reminding me. I want to thank everyone in the city and on council who has supported our blood drives. I was so pleased to see so many recognizable faces, and we did well. For a December blood drive, we did very well. Our next blood drive will be in February.
All right. Excellent. And on to Mr. Denning.
I just want to say, a lot of people question sometimes why when we go through and we vote, most of us are, I mean, it's kind of a unanimous yes, and I think the answer is, it's because of the staff do such a good job of explaining and giving us the information ahead of time and answering all our questions and straightening it out either in the work sessions or via phone calls. And so, Josh, I just want to thank you for that. And it makes a lot less tension amongst the group when we have everything taken care of. And we do appreciate that. And I just want to say thank you and give a little bit of explanation to folks of why it just seems so fluid when we vote. And it's because staff does such a good job of getting everything done, and we appreciate that. I do also want to remind everybody that Santa Claus is coming to town Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. I think the north side is on Tuesday and the south side is on Wednesday this year. So I think we've swapped. So be out there. They've got the maps out. Check the fire department's website. That's where it's at, right?
And then I'll
And
copy it
it's
over
up
on the city.
Facebook.
Mhm.
And so the map's there and approximate times of when we're going to, when they'll be there and when Santa will be there. Remember, Santa will be on the passenger side waving at everybody. But hopefully the weather will be a little warmer and people will be able to come out and take a look and see what's going on. But the fire truck will have Christmas lights all over it, and Santa will be in the passenger seat. So it's a pretty neat thing for our community, and it brings out the community, it makes the community feel Christmas is coming.
Wonderful. Well, I should have mentioned at the beginning of councilmember comments that there is an executive session on the agenda, and we will be adjourning this meeting to convene the executive session before we conclude the meeting. So at this time, is there a motion to go into executive session for the reason listed on the
Move to go into
agenda?
executive session for the reasons on the agenda.
Second?
We have a motion from Mr. Denning and a second from Ms. Fry. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes, so we are in exec at 6:30.